warning, you have reached ASMM Digital Small Business Connections. We're the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, and that's the last time we're doing that. This is our last episode of this format. We're going to switch over to Marketing Moms, not this coming Monday, because we are going to run an older episode on Monday because it's Labor Day, and we're going to be at a jazz festival in DC, actually. But after that, the following week, we're going to start Marketing Moms, and I'll be doing that with Anastasia Van Greshapi, and I'm not going to ask you how to say her last name or spell her last name, I promise, because it has, I think, 26 letters, so you don't want to do that. I do want to remind you, you can still subscribe, and you will get the new podcast. You can subscribe at YouTube/Brendan Annie, and you'll find all of our videos there, because we do a lot of things. You'll also find some older videos about running, which you might like. If you are a business owner, start running. It will make you feel better. I want to tell you, we are doing this live. Because we are doing it live, you can ask questions. So please do leave a comment wherever you're listening, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. If you leave a comment, I'm going to see that here, and I can ask our guest. You can get a live answer. If you're listening to it on a podcast, you can't do that, but that's okay. You can message us with that, and we'll get you an answer for whatever it is you need. So our guest today is Jessica Fialkovich. I had to ask her how to say it. I'm so glad I did, because I said it wrong the first time. She is an entrepreneur whose focus is on helping people to buy and sell businesses. So let's welcome her on.
Hi.
Hey, Jessica. Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, this is exciting. And I think it's something, I don't know how many people go into business thinking that they're going to sell their business. But I know an awful lot of people who are thinking about buying businesses. So it's really timely.
Yeah. I think that's one thing I talk about a lot, is that I don't think most of us go in as small business owners or entrepreneurs thinking about this grand scheme to sell. I think we're all caught up in the passion and the moment of starting and growing the business. And we really don't think about selling until, sometimes with our clients, until we start thinking about it too late. Right?
Yes. Yeah. I actually just finished, I don't know if you saw that. I just finished the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. And it was one of the things they talked about. And at the beginning of the 16 weeks, they said, what is your exit plan? And most people are like, I don't have an exit plan. I don't know what I'm doing. And by the end of the 16 weeks, everybody had an idea of what they wanted to do. Yeah. And it will probably change again, but at least they're thinking about it. So that's probably a first step, right?
Yeah, that's the whole concept of like starting with the end in mind. And that Goldman Sachs program is fantastic. But I always talk to people, I'm like, so my phrase is exit options. Like, what are your options to get out of the business? Like, one, if you decide you don't like it, if it doesn't work, or you come to the end of your career and you're like, I'm done. I want to retire. I want to go sail my boat around the Caribbean. Who knows? Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that sounds lovely. I'd like to do that. Maybe I'll just do that. All right. So tell us about some of the mistakes that you need to avoid when you're selling your business.
So it's funny because we were just talking about the first one. So the first one is not to wait too long. So it's to try and think about what are these exit options, or what is your end plan before it comes time to sell. And most small business owners and most entrepreneurs, we don't actually sell our businesses for financial reasons. We sell businesses for personal reasons. So something happens in our life, right? It's usually a life change. Maybe a partner gets a new job and we have to move across the country. Maybe we're presented with a new opportunity that is just more interesting to what we're doing now. Then we also mentioned like retirement. And sometimes, like, unfortunately, there's things that happen in our lives, like illness or fatigue or burnout, that just forces a sale. So the first mistake to avoid is to actually have this conversation with yourself and, your trusted advisors, your partners, your spouse, and your community of like, what is my plan? What happens when I decide I'm done here? And the mistake is that most business owners don't do that until they're forced to sell. And typically, like, look, I use the analogy a lot to the housing market. Right? If you wait to sell your house until you're forced to do so, right? You could end up in a short sale or a bankruptcy situation.
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, like, you look at your realtor, like, what can you do to sell my business or sell my house the fastest way possible? Your realtor is probably going to be like, lower the price, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So it's the same thing with a business. So if you're waiting till that end and then you're on a short timeline, you're burnt out, like you have to make a move in 60 days, there's not a whole lot you can get for it. So that pre-plan is really, really powerful. And it's funny you brought it up as the first part of our conversation, Anne.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking too, and this came because one of the things that we've thought about doing is starting a business with another friend of mine. And one of the first things we did was call an attorney. And one of the first things she said to us is if you go into a partnership, you need to know what your exit plan is before you even start. Yeah. So that because, especially with a partner, right? Because you need to know, is it going to be okay? Are you going to make it a plan that if this partner leaves, that this partner keeps it, or is that partner going to pass it on to their family in some way, right? So, yeah, you really do have to think these things through.
You do have to think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I know. Let's just say one more thing. Like I think about is just having realistic expectations. And I think a mistake business owners don't do. And I applaud you for doing that Goldman Sachs program, because I talk a lot about that. We learn as entrepreneurs how to build a business and how to grow a business, but not a lot of us dive into education about that third phase of the journey, you're selling a business. So by educating yourself on the business sale process, we're going to talk a little bit about valuations today too. That really helps set your expectations as a business owner of like, what is my business worth and what's realistic in terms of a time frame and structure to get out of it. So one of the second biggest mistake I see when people are selling businesses is their expectations are just not in line with what the market will bear. And that's all solved through education, right? And we can talk resources at the end and things like that.
Well, and you just said that. So I think when you think about it, it's not just selling the business. It's, I talked to somebody recently who says, I want to sell my business because I'm so tired of running it.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you're going to have to probably run it for at least a year after you've sold it, because it's you. Your business is you. They're not going to want to buy it and not know how to run it. They're not going to want to buy it and have you just walk away, or they're going to lose, half your customers. So you do have to think about that. The person who buys it from you is most likely going to want you to stick around at least for a little bit.
Yeah, very true. It's called a training and transition period. And at a minimum, you're looking at probably 30 to 60 days. And that's if you're not really running your business. That's if you have, like, we call them owner absentee businesses. You have a manager in place, like you're pretty hands off. But
right.
To your point, and if the business is you, if you're really involved in day to day, really involved in customer relationship management, anything like that, you're probably looking at 6 months, a year or more that you're staying on to transition that business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, tell us, what are the things we need to know about buying a business? Because right now, we were just talking last week, I think the Wall Street Journal said it's the great resignation, right? It's not the great recession, it's the great resignation. People are leaving their jobs in droves. And a lot of it is because they want to start their own business. So how do you do that?
Yeah, it is so true and so crazy. It's the largest buyer's market I've seen in my career. I've been doing this for 10 years. And it's because we have those people leaving corporate jobs. We have other small businesses trying to buy businesses. So I've got 3 tips for buying a business. And the first thing is you have to define your search criteria, or the why or what you want. So I get this standard email every day, probably 6 to 10 times a day. It's like, hey, Jess, I'm looking for a business that is growing, that makes money, that the owner is not involved in the day-to-day operations. Do you have anything for me? And I'm like, well, that's not very specific, right? And
yeah,
right. And you're marketing, right? And so, when you're making an ask of somebody, you have to be specific in what you're asking for.
absolutely.
So that's defining, like, why am I buying this business? Am I buying it to grow my current company? Am I buying it because I need a job for myself or a career? Or am I buying it for some other strategic reason? And then once you understand that, you can define the what, right? What size does the company need to be? Does it have to be profitable? Or am I just acquiring it for assets because I need a new customer list or something like that?
Right.
Does it have to be in a specific geographic location, or can it be anywhere in the world? And once you narrow that down, it makes your search so much faster and so much easier.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So what are some of the others?
So just like everything else, when we're buying anything in life, we have to have a budget, right? So how much can we afford to buy? And I do tell people that if this is your first acquisition, say you're a small business owner and you're buying your first business to tuck in or roll in, or increase your current business, you probably want to look at something that's like 25% of your current business. So if you're doing $1 million in revenue, you're probably looking for something that's about $250,000. And that's just because it's your practice, right? You don't want to invest too much time and money. And if something goes wrong, then you're not really sticking your neck out there. But besides that, you also want to understand what you can afford to buy. So when you're buying a business, you can use cash, like your personal cash. You can use seller financing, where the seller will finance a portion of the transaction. Or, and this is what's driving a lot of the buyers in our market now too, is you can use bank loans that are backed by the SBA guarantee. And those are really powerful loans. Usually you have to put like 20% down. So we have a lot of buyers using those vehicles right now because you can buy a business for 20% down and then finance the rest. So using those three mechanisms, you have to figure out like, what can I afford in terms of cash down, but also what can I afford to take on right now? What do I have the time to take on right now?
Right. That makes total sense. So how do you know if you're selling your business, how much it's worth? How do you find this out?
So I mean, in terms of business valuation, how much your business is worth, you can work with a business broker. My primary business is we own a business brokerage firm. You can work with an appraisal company as well, or an investment banker, depending on how large your company is. So if your company is doing, say, 20 to 30 million a year or less, you're probably working with a business broker. More than that, an investment banker. But businesses are valued very similar. Again, going back to our real estate analogy, so they're valued on comps, right? So when you go to sell your house, your realtor is going to pull comps in your neighborhood. What are other houses like yours selling for? And it's the same thing in businesses. There's actually private sale databases that brokers and investment bankers have access to. And we can look up the metrics on these private business sales. And we can see, what did a business similar in your size in your industry sell for? And how that's calculated is a multiple of earnings, right? So it could be, I don't want to throw too many acronyms out there.
Right.
My industry loves acronyms. I don't like them.
But yeah, we're in the same boat. Marketing does as well. And I don't either.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the popular one is, you hear EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Just think of it as a function of your net profit, right? So you've got your net profit, and then you have a multiple of that. And that's how your business trades. But those multiples are determined by those comps that are pulled. And if you're selling a marketing firm, you see how much other marketing firms are selling for, right? And there's usually a range, but it depends on both the size of your business, the quantitative number of your earnings, and also the quality of the business, right? How is the business run? Does the owner have anything special or proprietary about it that makes it worth more than another marketing firm in the market?
Right. That makes sense. Because they're all run differently. I mean, if you just think of cupcake places, right?
Yep.
There's down the road from us, there are 4 different cupcake places. They're all different. I would spend a whole lot more for Georgetown cupcakes than the next guy, right? Because they're established. People know them. If they give me the right recipe and they stick around, it's going to be more valuable. So it makes total sense. It really does.
So it's a complicated formula, but if you talk to a business broker, an investment banker, they can figure it out for you pretty quickly in like a week or two. It's usually in that preparatory for sale phase, right? I think a lot of business owners like to understand, like, well, hey, what's my value worth just for fun?
Right.
And like we have a valuation calculator on our website. I think it can give you a range of things like that. But if you're really getting ready to sell, like that's probably your first step in the process. It's like, what is the valuation? What does my valuation report say? Because on top of those personal reasons we talked about selling, usually there's a financial component as well, right? Like, how much can I get out of this business? And is it worth going through the sale process? Because the sales process is not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Right. No, I would think it wouldn't be. So, and it's personal. It's so much more personal than selling a house.
Very personal.
It's like selling a child, and that's frowned upon. So,
I know. Well, the analogy I use sometimes is, it's like selling your baby. But it is,
it is, yeah.
Things we've built from scratch and spent years and years nurturing. It's like another child.
Absolutely. So before we move on from this subject, I want to know, are there things that people do wrong when trying to get a value for their property or for their business?
Yeah, one is hiring the wrong person, right? So there's a lot of different ways to value a company for different reasons, right? So if you're raising capital, like say you're going after venture capital, that's a much different valuation method than if you're selling. Um,
Okay.
if you're searching for debt, that's a much different valuation method than if you're selling. If you're trying to liquidate the business, same thing. So a lot of people go to like their CPA or their wealth manager and they'll say, "Hey, can you give me a business valuation?" They'll say, "Yes, I can give you a business valuation." But it's usually the wrong valuation because it's not based on that market data. Um,
Okay.
and like anything else we're shopping for in life, ultimately, the price is going to be determined by what a buyer is willing to pay in the marketplace. So this market method or looking at comps is trying to predict what that buyer will pay and not come up with some fancy, formula that we would use to, get debt or liquidate the assets or something like that. So that's the biggest mistake I see is like, oh, like my CPA can just do this. Most CPAs aren't educated on business sales or valuation of business sales, and they don't have access to those private sale databases as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It occurs to me as you're saying that again back to real estate.
Hmm.
We were trying to buy a house right before COVID. So getting desperate because we'd already sold our house. So we
Right.
have to have a house. But we're putting in offers at above asking. And what we would find is we were putting them above asking by quite a bit. And we'd still lose by $250,000 because nobody could do evaluation of properties before COVID, right at that point, because it was just unusual. And people, how much you will spend is dependent on who you are, right? And everybody's
Right.
desperate. So they're going, oh, I'll spend whatever just so I can get a house. I don't want to be homeless during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah,
So you
exactly.
don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the
So,
market will determine that. I mean, we have businesses that sell for less than asking price. And then we have businesses, we just brought a business to market. It was in property management a few months ago. And property management is very competitive right now. It's very hard to buy a business in that industry. And we had 18 offers in 24 hours,
oh my
which is
gosh.
very not typical for selling your business. Like, most businesses will get 1 to 3 offers total. So it's the same thing. Like we tried to predict what we thought the company would sold for, but because there's so much competition in that specific market, we really had no idea. So
Absolutely, that makes
yeah.
total sense. So, all right, so let's talk about something that we go into a business, and you've probably read the E-Myth Revisited, and
Mhm.
and we're technicians, we're doing the work, and we forget. I will be very honest. Until I did the Goldman Sachs class, I totally forgot about trying to run it for value and profitability. So, how do you suggest that people do that?
Yeah. So a big question a lot of people ask me is like, how do I increase the value of my business? And it's very good because as a practice for business owners, running your business like you're going to sell it and increase the value is going to by nature increase the profit, right? Because we
Right.
just talked about valuations a function of profit. So the first and foremost thing, and this isn't increasing your profitability, but just your knowledge, is you have to have clean books and records. And this is the most boring part of my job, but I talk about financials and financial management a lot. So when I mean that, it's your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, and your tax returns. And look, I'm not the IRS, so we don't pass judgments on how we all keep our books. And I know some entrepreneurs like want to minimize their profitability, to minimize their taxes and things like that. But when we're going to sell, we really need to maximize that profit on our financial statements, and they have to be clean and tight. I just mentioned that a lot of buyers use financing, use banks to get these deals done. And if we've ever been through a banking process of trying to get debt for our own companies, we know there's a lot of financial investigation. So
Right.
clean books and records, 3 years typically is what a banker or buyer is going to ask for, 3 years history, and they all have to be tied together. So if you show $1 million on your profit and loss, you should show $1 million on your tax return, right? That kind of stuff. So it's a
Yes.
boring nuts and bolts, but it's got to get
Well, and
done.
it's something most of us as business owners, I mean, I know there are some really nerdy types and I love them. I think they're adorable. That's not me. And so again, going back to the Goldman Sachs, the very first week was financials. And I thought, I am never going to get through this class. This is horrible. I'm like, this is going to be like this for 16 weeks. But doing it has made a huge difference. And the other thing is it made me hire a CPA, CFA, not a CPA, a CFO.
Yep.
And somebody who's not just going to do my books, but is going to help guide me in my financial decisions. It makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. And that's a great point. And like, you don't have to do this yourself. There's plenty of qualified financial professionals out there, bookkeepers, CPAs, CFOs. You don't even have to hire them full time. You can hire them on a fractional basis now, right?
Yes, absolutely. And which is what I did. I hired Courtney, who was on this show. If you get a chance, go back and watch her. She was on this show a few episodes ago. And I loved her so much that I interviewed several, but I called her immediately and said, I need to interview you again because you're pretty awesome. But yeah, you can hire her on a fractional basis, which is wonderful.
So it's not a lot of heavy lift here. We're asking the owners to do is you could outsource this, but they have an understanding of how they work, right?
Absolutely.
The second thing is, and you brought this up a little bit with E-Myth, and I talk a lot about operator versus owner, which is what that book is about.
Yes.
But business owners, so someone who manages the business, doesn't work in day-to-day operations, are worth more than business operators. A business operator is working day-to-day in the operation. They usually have close relationships with all the customers, the sales. And what happens there is that causes risk for a buyer, right? Because if I'm running my business and everyone's doing business with me because, and you're doing business with me because you like me, right?
Yes.
Well, what happens if I go away? Maybe you don't like the next person, right?
Right.
So, so transitioning yourself over time, this doesn't happen overnight, but over time, how do you relieve your day-to-day responsibilities as an owner so you can move into that ownership hat? And what it does is it increases the value of your business, but it allows you also to take a step back as a business owner. And then you can focus on like, how do I grow this company? How do I make more profit? Like, you ask yourself some really deep, hard questions about how do you move the business forward versus being in the day-to-day tactical seat.
Absolutely. That is so important. And it's something I hadn't thought of, but it makes complete sense. Right. It's for me, it was an accident that I stepped out the first time. Not an accident. I had my appendix burst. So I had to take 2 weeks off, and suddenly we were watching Anastasia run it. And then at the beginning of this year, I took 6 weeks off, and then I've taken 16 weeks of really being off to do the course. So it does take you out and let other people see that your team can handle things, right? So that if you want to sell it, you're not just saying, oh, well, I'm walking away and my customers are coming with me.
Right. And it goes back to too, when, you go back to selling, then that transition period is shorter too, because the business isn't relying on you. So,
absolutely.
The last thing I say, my last tip in here is, so then you use that time and you apply it to grow and run the business, right? So especially when you're leading up to sale, you actually want to run a more profitable and a more growth focused business than you would have previously. So a lot of buyers are looking for businesses that are growing. I usually say shooting for 15 to 20% at a minimum year over year, and focusing on the profit side, not necessarily the revenue side. So having a growth plan in place, whether that's organic or growing by buying another business, we call it growing through acquisition, but actively growing that business and managing it through the sale. So you're taking that time you got back from spending all your time in the technician role to now applying your skills and saying, like, how do I grow this thing? And that's it's going to increase the size because you're by nature growing it, but also showing a buyer that you have a path for growth increases the valuation just then and there. It makes it a better qualitative business because you have
that makes sense.
For growth. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Instead of what is that saying? Oh gosh, a goal without a plan is just a wish.
Yep.
Right. It's a similar idea that if you're not planning it, if you're not working towards it, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So So, all right, well, let's talk about strategies to increase the likelihood you're going to be able to sell the business. What are some of the things we can do to make it more likely?
Yeah. So this is the other piece too. Only about 13% of all small businesses ever sell, right? So we're looking at 87% of businesses do not sell. So one, I want to celebrate like business owners that were able to sell. Like that's a huge accomplishment.
Huge accomplishment.
Huge accomplishment. But also your sale is not guaranteed. And even if you get an offer on your business, most of those deals will fall apart. So we just talked about a few things you can do to increase the value, which also increases the likelihood, right? Clean books and records. Clean books and records are the number one deal killer. Is, a buyer will get in there. And once you get an offer on the business, there's this period called due diligence. It's like the inspection period of a business. And the number one reason businesses die in that due diligence period is because the books and the records and the financials don't match up to what the owner is presenting to the buyer. So that's really increasing the likelihood that your business will sell. And then we talked about the owner and operator seat too. That's another big one. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say something. I just want you to repeat what you just said. That's the number one reason that your business doesn't sell. So we talk about this a lot, so one of the things we do is Ann's unsolicited advice. It's our favorite thing to do. But we give it to all of our clients and we say, you need to outsource things. And we say it from the standpoint of you need to outsource things so that you can actually get work done, right? Yes. But you also need to do it. And specifically from a financial standpoint, because you're not an expert in the financials. It's for me, the first thing you outsource is hiring a CPA, right? Somebody or a bookkeeper, somebody who's going to take care of you on that end. But then as you grow, so hiring a CFO. But it's so important. Now that you're saying that, I think it's even more important than I thought it was before.
Yeah. I mean, look, I know I don't love financials. I'm a broker and I still don't love financials.
Yeah.
Right. But it's so important in the dynamic of a business and a dynamic of an ownership in a business. So it's about getting help. And I think like going back to these strategies to increase the likelihood too, it's just getting help in general. Right. This is not, like I said, selling your business is a lengthy process. It usually takes about 8 to 9 months is the average for a small business. And you have to be running the business. We were just talking about like you have to be running the business and growing the business. And it's a lot of work. It's a full-time job. It's 2 full-time jobs.
Absolutely.
So getting some help through this process will increase the likelihood it will sell. And it will be through CPA. You definitely want an attorney too. These are legal transactions, right? You want them documented properly. And then for the sales process, and I'm not just saying this self-serving, but it's really helpful to have a broker through the process because selling your business is a full-time job and running your business is a full-time job. And you can't really let either side drop while you're trying to present the best image to a buyer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm so sorry. I don't usually throw my people under the bus, but I am gonna, because I do want to know, I had talked to somebody recently and they said, you don't have to straight up buy a business. There are creative ways. So what are some of the most creative ways you've seen of someone selling or buying a business?
Yeah, it really comes down to, so we touched on it a little bit, seller financing, right? So seller financing is a way where you get the seller as a buyer to finance some of the purchase price. And within that, there is so many different ways to do seller financing. So you can just do a straight loan, right? And loans me money, I pay her back, I take the business over the day we close. You could do what's called a structured sale, or like I'll buy 20% now, and then over time I'll buy more into the company. There's earnouts. We see earnouts used a lot in larger deals, but we're starting to see them used in smaller deals too. And an earnout is basically says like, we're not going to define the value of the business today. We're going to pinpoint it in the future. And we're going to say that I get a percentage of all of the revenue. This is just one metric you could use it on. A percentage of all the revenue generated for the next 3 years. Maybe it's 5% of revenue over the next 3 years. And that's how I get my purchase price out. And then Ann gets to buy the company. So there's a lot of creative ways to do that. But it's all falling under that seller financing hat. And then there's other things underneath that, but a lot of creative things you can do.
And would you use a broker for something like that as well?
Yeah, you'd use
a broker.
Good to know. Yeah, I mean, look, you want somebody that's involved in deals, that's doing deals in the current market and lots of them, because they're seeing all these different structures, right? So you can pull that person, that broker can pull their experience from one of their last deals and give you ideas of how different deals have been structured in the past. And you can apply that to your own deal.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant. So, and that's, for us, we'll go into some place and we'll mention something so small and we're like, that's just common sense. And it's really not. It's common sense to a marketing company.
Right.
It's not common sense to a business. And when you're selling your business, you've never done this before. Most likely you've never done it before. So having somebody who has and who understands it, it's so important. It really is. I want to mention something here that I think we've only had 30 minutes. We've had 30 minutes. And I learned so much, but I think there's so much more to learn. And you have a podcast. So can you tell everybody about your podcast?
Yeah. So the Deal Board is a podcast that's hosted by myself and Andy Cagnetta is my co-host. And we talk all about buying and selling businesses. So we have over 150 episodes. We've been on the air for 2 years. New show released every Wednesday through all the podcasting apps. But we do a deep dive into a lot of the topics we talked about today.
That's great. So yeah, so everybody tune into that, subscribe to it. When you subscribe, leave her a review. That's what you do for the podcasters. We love that. And now I want to talk to you. I'm going to have you tell us about the book that you picked as your favorite book.
Yes. So my favorite book is not a business book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. It's by Viktor Frankl. And it's about a story of a man that goes through the Holocaust, but during his journey through that time period in his life, he takes a look of gratitude through the whole experience. And I read this. This is the first book I read at the beginning of every year to remind me that you can find gratitude and opportunity in even the worst situations in life. It's a great perspective change for me. And it's just, yeah, I don't know how many years in a row I've done that now, but January 1st is the first book I pick up.
And I think, gratitude is so important anyway in everyday life, but especially in a business life when at 6 o'clock at night, you're banging your head into the desk going, why do I do this? And then you just think, okay, but maybe today sucked, but at least I got to talk to Jessica, right? So let me find out one thing. Yes, exactly. All right. You also have something coming up for buying a business. You have a buying a business course. Can you tell everybody about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is buying a business. It's for business buying 101. So if you've never bought a business before, we get lots of questions about, how do I find deals? How do I structure deals? We're talking about some financing. It's a 6-week boot camp. It's virtual, delivered over Zoom. You can find information by going to my website, jessicafialkovich.com, and it gives you all the basics you need to know about start to finish. How do you find a business all the way to getting it closed?
That's great. And we're going to have Jessica's information in our show notes. So please do go over there, check them out. Go look at the course. I think it's important. And I love Zoom. I love that we can take courses from anywhere. As a matter of fact, when we're done today, I'm taking a course that's not even from this country and learning something new. So it's wonderful that you can do that. Thank you so much. You stick around for just 1 minute. I want to tell everybody what we have coming up next. All right, guys, I am going to do something unusual today. I'm going to talk about my baby. My youngest son is 15 years old. He is at Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and he's hoping to go to Berkeley or another music school in the future. And in order to do that, one of the things a musician is now expected to do is to build a following. And so as his marketing mom's right there. We have started a Instagram account for him. So if you're interested in watching a young person make his way through an art school to go to an art school, it's kind of, I think, going to be an interesting journey. And we really are going to focus on that journey through music, the things that you have to do in order to be able to become a musician. So if you follow him at Zane, Zane, B as in boy, music, that would be great. We would love that. I'd appreciate it. I do want to also tell you that you can find us at asmmdigital.com. If you have any questions about marketing, if you need somebody to market your business, or you just want to know what the heck am I supposed to do, we're going to be having courses as well shortly. But until then, we are currently accepting new clients primarily in the home services field. So if you're a plumber, a chimney guy, or a electrician or a builder, let us know. We'd love to help you out. Let me go back to Jessica. Jessica, you have been great. This has been a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. It was great being on the show. I feel honored to be the last guest too, and really excited for marketing moms and to listen in the future.
I think that's going to be great. And Anastasia's got a cute little Australian accent. You guys make her mad and it gets stronger. So somebody make her mad and we'll have a really strong Australian accent out. So, yeah. So Jessica, you stick around. Everybody else, we will see you in 2 weeks. Next week is a rerun of a past show. And in 2 weeks, we'll start Marketing Month. So we're looking forward to it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.